Welcome back to Get a Grip on Lighting, live at LightFair 2025, Greg.
Here we are, getting them.
You got to go to KeystoneTech.com. That's KeystoneTech.com.
What is that?
I don't know, man. It's a little.
Is that on your finger?
It's on my finger.
Okay. Here we are.
We're with Scott Metker of Autani, and we're talking lighting controls. You know, a lot of people talk about lighting controls. And a lot of people, utilities are asking for lighting controls. And Nailed has a course, a certification about lighting controls coming up. But I don't think that many people know a lot about lighting controls, Scott Metker. Would you agree with that?
I think that's true. I mean, you see organizations with sort of differing levels of competency for sure. Some people are obviously just getting started. I've talked a great deal about various energy codes starting to stress, not just basic lighting controls, but then centrally networked lighting controls, and then bringing all that data to, again, and sending that to the utility, applying for rebates, that whole process. And I think people are being drug along in that process as the rebates get more sophisticated. We're seeing, again, those prescriptive rebates are simply starting to dry up or change, or they're going to at least require some form of centrally networked system. And so in doing that, people who might have just, purchased a fixture with a basic sensor on it that maybe turned it on or off, but had no other, adjustable settings is now being forced to adapt.
Yeah, there's almost like the utilities paid for nothing.
Yeah.
Well, that's fair. From a control aspect, from a fixture, do you like luminaire level lighting control, or would you prefer?
We have to be pragmatic because we just know there are certain places in the country and certain energy codes that simply don't support that yet.
Yeah,
I mean, I think from a data perspective, we love it, right?
Yeah,
because
sure.
that also gives us more granular data. We're able to look at the facility and say, your occupancy rate's 40%. Maybe you want to change how you're using it. But we know that if you're going to go retrofit a school, in some districts, you're not going to change that out with, a luminaire installed controller in those cases.
So what do you guys? What are you getting out of LightFair yourself right now? Making the rounds.
There's obviously the big topic has been tariffs, right? I mean, so one of the things that we're talking to a lot of people about is just trying to understand. Well, hey, what are you guys seeing in terms of price increases? How's that going to affect? And what I'm seeing so far is people still don't know.
Can I ask you something? I want to ask you something that I think is very powerful. Okay, you guys are Americans. I'm Canadian. You talk about the tariffs. Do Americans talk about the tariffs
Here it is.
differently than Canadians do?
It's the great unknown. It's come so fast and so many things have happened. Yeah, so I think we do. Frankly, it's a disruption when it lands so quickly, right? And it's like all we're trying to do is adapt, do our business, keep our heads low, survive the process.
Some sense of stability would be nice.
It changes every week. Every week we have our highs and our lows. Our manic depressive phase seems to vary day to day based on what happens in the news.
Well, what is it? The component piece of a control, does that all come from China, or I know lighting and LED tubes and LED chips and all that, but what is it about controls, and where does that come from, and why does it come from there? Can it come from here?
I think certainly some of the components that make up those controls, aren't going to come from here, tomorrow. Certainly, more controls could be assembled and/or tested here. That's also a big point. And then also a significant portion of those controls also represents the firmware and software that can be developed here. So certainly more things can be onboarded in that perspective. And really, it's as a matter of going through and kind of looking at the constituent components that make up a control. The problem is it can't happen tomorrow, right? It's a transition over time, and so over the next 3 months, it's a very interesting journey for sure. And people have built up inventory to basically be able to weather the storm until we know what the long-term plan is. But I mean, we, like anyone else,
I would make that if there's a long-term plan.
May you live in interesting times,
yes.
I say, right?
Yes. I'm not sure there is a long-term plan. That's what I would say. I look at it from the outside looking in, and I'm not going to assume that anyone's an idiot or somebody's stupid or anything. These are very, very extraordinarily powerful, smart people that become the president of the United States in either party. Okay, the people that are behind that effort are generally of high intelligence. The question is, what's the plan? And I don't see it from the lighting perspective, and I don't see it at other areas, but I'm not going to assume that there isn't a plan.
Well, assuming there is a plan, I think one of the complexities there is it's not a plan that everyone can be aware of. right? So in any trade negotiation
Sure.
process,
Yes.
you don't want
I
to lay
agree
your
with
cards on
that.
the table. So unfortunately, that leaves many of us out in the cold,
Exactly.
trying to interpret that plan as we see. And so from a business perspective, that's difficult. And what I'm seeing here is everyone is just saying, well, we'll wait till the end of this month before we announce anything,
Yes.
and draw a conclusion. So.
Yes.
That's certainly one trend I've seen. The other two things I would say that are interesting that we're seeing here on the floor is we're starting to see some of the first AI things coming out. There's been some sessions where people are talking about AI in lighting design. People are talking about AI in doing takeoffs, as an example, and planning controls. And the other one is I think we're seeing a lot more emphasis on centralized gateways here than I've seen in LightFair in previous years.
When you say centralized gateways, what do you mean?
Well, I mean, there's that difference between what I would call room-based controls, networking controls, which you simply have a switch that's wireless talking to a local room, and then bringing all that data back to a centralized controller. And that's when we talk about having that centralized built-in control is that next tier of rebates is requiring those systems. And I think the inflection point is I'm talking to a lot more people here who are saying their customers are coming to us and now asking for that or demanding it from us. And so I haven't necessarily seen that as much in previous years.
I know we talked to you on Get a Grip on Lighting a couple weeks ago, but is there ever going to be a standardized control system, or is it always going to be Wild West and everybody doing their own thing?
It's a classic debate between, obviously everything being standardized with interchangeable parts, can be a good thing for the consumer. The problem is that it can also stifle innovation from the standpoint that if you're trying to make things cheaper, faster, or easier, then you have to appeal to a standards community and then push those things out.
But you lose your installed base.
And you can lose an installed base as well, because if you're going to move to that standard, you have to move away from everything. So everyone has to move away from every installed base.
Yeah, imagine every time somebody built a house, the plug was changed.
Right.
Right. But one of my favorite examples is, I've seen an old cartoon where someone says, hey, there are 14 standards. Let's try to make a 15th that unifies them, and then the new situation is you have 15 standards.
Exactly.
Right? That's the problem, and that's how these standards emerge.
That's why you got to go to getagriponlighting.com and follow this show, because we don't care about that stuff. We talk about it straight up. We let everybody know that we don't know the answer, but we know what the problem is, Greg.
Or we'll at least talk about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Go to KeystoneTech.com. That's KeyStonetech.com. And, of course, Scott Metker, welcome back. Thank you for coming
so much.
again.
It's a real pleasure.
A great pleasure talking to you. All you out there on the live stream, stay with us.